Hello and welcome to my talk, Useful and Beautiful Developer Docs and How to Create Them. I hope you can't see the Zoom overlay as I do, but I think I will be fine to show you. I'm here in beautiful Portugal. I only have one screen, so I can't read the chat. So if anything is wrong with my microphone or my camera, please unmute yourself and shout out loud so we can fix this. This talk is a premiere for me. And it will be about my experience improving our docs at my current company over the course of about 1 year. The last update was 3 weeks ago. And I think the docs are now in a state where I would say they are actually useful. And we went from barely very usable to actually useful, I think. The first thing is, do you remember a time where you have to use a product and you thought, yeah, that product is really great, and this had so bad developer docs that you can't even get it to work, and you were somehow, yeah, no. Scrap that product, I try another thing because the product docs are so bad. I think you have, everybody has, that's the main problem, because developers are very proud of their work. They like to share what they do, but actually writing docs is a really big problem. And if you have docs, they're not well structured in the normal case. So there are very few examples of actually well structured docs. And I will show you a few of them. And then you go to the left side and say, yeah, there's great developer docs, and we want to have this too, and not be like, oh yeah, that's a great product, but I can't use it actually. And yeah, that screws your product over. One of the first things you come across when you search for great developer docs, and I always come across them on LinkedIn and social media, and also if you search for them, are the Stripe docs. Stripe is basically a boring product, but it's a thing everybody needs. Basically, if you sell something online, Stripe is more or less the go-to product to go to, and it's the developer docs of Stripe are famous. Everybody loves them because they have this interactive API docs where you can put in your own data and play around and see how it works. It would work in production. So you could play in the browser how this works. But this is only a small part of the Stripe docs. If you go to the starting page or the homepage of the Stripe docs, you see this wonderfully and guiding system. And this talk will be more about the guiding system on how to structure your documentation, that you can actually have a clear thread in your documentation where someone say, okay, I want to do this, and then I follow these steps and get it to run. Because that's, in my opinion and my experience, the thing that is missing in a lot of those. So not to quote only the most famous docs here, but also some other docs that are built quite well. If you want to check them out in detail, there's this link I put on the right side. Is the Pronowix Best Developer Portals Award. It's not developer docs, but developer portals. But usually developer docs are part of the developer portals. And usually they have a nice starting page, a nice homepage. And I put 4 docs there that really stood out for me. So the ABM AMRO docs, that's a product you won't even know, but a lot of people know about the Ivan docs. They were all the buzz about because they won an award for this. And you see all these different documentation. I recommend to check this out if you are interested in developer portals and also developer docs. And you see this nice structure here. We will see a few more examples of this in this talk. So let's get back to our docs and how I found them last year. So this was the starting page of our docs. I have a JavaScript background. I developed TypeScript. And I have to say that you come to this page and you think, yeah, cool. I wanted to go to the docs, and now I get all the same information of our homepage. That's actually not what you want. You want to dive right in, because if some developers come to your developer docs and see the same information that is on your homepage somewhere, then they say, yeah, cool. I already know this. Get me to the good stuff. Then they click on getting started. And then this information is already is regurgitated again. So, what is ASCII used for? What is this here? Again, maybe they think, yeah, cool, there's a getting started guide and there's installing ASCII, and then they see, well, you have to install Node.js, you have to nph.js, and what am I even going to do here? What you also notice is that this whole documentation is a little bit sparse. So there's not a lot of things in here, which is quite surprising because the product we have here has 3 components and it's actually quite complicated to install. So there should be more. And when you look to the API docs, when you get it to run, there was actually an error in there in the getting started. I found out when I tested it. Then you play around a little bit with the API docs and see like, yeah, cool. I have this method in our SDK. Yeah, what does it do? No examples, no thingy. I can't click. How do I use it? So I would say these docs, if you're a JavaScript or TypeScript person and know the Node ecosystem very well, then you can use it. That's actually, I got it to run eventually with the help of another developer of my company. But if you're new to product, don't know your way around, and that's the funny thing when we talk about something like audience, then someone coming from a Python development background or Java development background or any other language, they're actually screwed. That's not usable at all. So let's dive a little bit into the mind of a developer. Developers hate marketing. As a developer advocate, I'm aware of this. Actually, they hate this fluffy, pussy kind of marketing where they say, yeah, we have these features and you can do this and this and this and this, because the developer's mind works differently. Usually we have a problem as a developer and we want to solve it. So there's no such thing as, oh, let's see what this product can do. It's more like, can this product solve my problem? This is the thing a developer comes to your product. So when they go to developer docs, they already evaluated, okay, this product could solve my problem. Cool. So we don't have to say, like we saw on the starting page of our initial documentation 1 year ago, features don't interest me. I want directions on how to implement something. So for example, in our product, this is like some form of automation. I want to automate an Android device. I want to automate an iOS device. Show me how that is done effectively, and not show me like, oh, cool, you have to install this and this and this, and then you have to do this and this and this. And I don't know what I'm actually doing. Does this solve my problem? Is this time invested well? And there's this funny thing. Developers are inherently impatient when they try out a product. Maybe we are patient with fixing bugs and all that stuff. But as a developer, I was like, I want to try out this product and I have to try out a lot of competitors. And I already get annoyed after 5 to 10 minutes. So it mustn't take less than 5 to 10 minutes for your documentation to actually show the value your product can do. That's the thing. So for developers, give directions, not features. Features are not the thing. And then a little bit about how to think about your docs. A lot of people think about docs like, yeah, we have to write them, and developers usually don't like to write them. And I didn't like them either at the beginning of my career, but then I realized, well, the docs, they're something you need to have. But then it still felt like, why am I writing docs? Is this just a requirement from a product owner? And after working with docs for a long time, I figured out that it's actually the product are your docs. And there's a great book which is called The Product Are Docs. So that you can't separate your product from your docs, or your software you're developing from your docs, because without the docs, your product is nothing if it's not completely intuitive. And intuitive is also a fluffy term where you can't say, yeah, what is this? What is intuitive? What is intuitive for me may not be intuitive for something from a different domain, like testing or infrastructure. It's a completely different thing. So when we talk about docs and product, they are one and the same thing. You have to have them. And for me, I like this hammer metaphor here, where you say, without the docs, your product doesn't have a hammer to drive in the solution. So your product have to feel like, yeah, that's a really useful tool to do one thing: evaluate and guide your developer to solve that problem. That's how you should think about docs. And then they become, there's more a sense of purpose behind docs. So this is not really useful. Let's see what we can do without the knowledge I had. Let's stop this here and go to the second version. So I thought, yeah, how can we make our docs a little bit more useful? I didn't have any theoretical background. I just wanted to make them more useful for developers that came to that site. So said, okay, let's work a little bit on the docs. So as you can see, I have to read out this. So now you see the starting page is already gone because we don't care about features. That's already a good thing. I don't want 2 more clicks to actually get to the good stuff for our developers. There's another thing a lot of people don't realize. If your docs are bad, but your search is good, your docs are actually useful. So the first thing I did when I tried to make them more useful is a search index. Because sometimes your docs are comprehensive enough for developers to find their stuff, but they are not well structured. But comprehensive is better than not existent. So to give more structure to this, I actually changed a few things. Not the structure here. I renamed here to guides. So we have some guides here. So where you can see, okay, there's a direction. I need to achieve something. Yeah, maybe it's in the guide. So that's cool. How to do something like relational element descriptions or such stuff. The starting page also looks completely different. We don't put any features there anymore, but we want to say, okay, what should I have to do? Do I want as a developer? Because sometimes developers come to you and say, yeah, I just want to try out your product. So make this as easy as possible. And there was the last summary of the talk before was like, yeah, cloud IDEs are the next big thing. And in the future, we only have cloud IDEs, and cloud IDEs are perfect. If you have something like an SDK, put them in StackBlitz, put them in Gitpod, put them in code spaces, and give a already set up environment. They just have to start in this cloud IDEs, and they get set up in no time, in under 1 minute, depending on how fast the service is. So the first thing I tried to do was put our whole SDK with a nice example here in Gitpod. And this is a screenshot from the Gitpod. So if you just want to try out our product, hit this button, go to the repository, start it in GitHub, and you're already set up and running in about 5 minutes because it's a bigger environment. So cool. That's the first direction I gave there, and this already brought some clarity. Or do I want to try it out locally? Then I go to local installation. So it's already like the developer can choose something. There's not something like we are automation, and I said we can automate Android, Windows, and all that stuff. It's still like, why do I have to do a local installation if I want to automate something on Android? That's still missing, but it's already a little bit better. We have some more tutorials here because tutorials are important. Also, the tutorials are structured in a way where you can see, okay, it's also AskUI stuff. It's just, there's some Android, there's some browser stuff, there's some desktop stuff. So if someone gets to the tutorials and finds them, they already have some form of structure and know which tutorials actually to follow to maybe achieve their use case and get it. What I also like, come from software architecture in my last position, I really like something like terminology. If you have a lot of domain terminology that's specific to your product, put them into terminology. In software architecture, it's called glossar. In Arc42, which I like a lot. That's really helpful because in our case, we have the AskUI runner, we have the AskUI SDK, we have the AskUI inference, all that stuff. And if you talk to developers and customers, it's always like they mix it. And you mix it yourself internally. So this is a big mess, and then you can communicate effectively. This also helps you to do something like linting later, where you can say, okay, this is called like that. And then you can weed out some terminology in your pages You can say, oh, that's not the right terminology there. And then we upped the API docs and we get to the next example here. It's a little bit inspired by Nginx, where you can say, okay, I don't want all this, because if you come to the API docs and are not familiar with the SDK, it's like, what are actions, what are element description, relations? I just want to click something. Then it's better to have that on one page and use the browser search, for example. And you see, I expanded all of the commands here a little bit, where you can say, okay, what does it do? Yeah, what is the method called? And what is the examples, a little bit examples here. And let's see if I can find something that's had actually a GIF. So we have browser automation, and yeah, we have the command with a GIF. That's also show, don't tell. That's the basic spirit. Yeah. So for me, this was already a big achievement to get it in a more usable state, but it still lacks some direction. So when I talk to our salesperson and he does a lot of demos, he doesn't find the things to help the customers achieve some form of onboarding. He says, yeah, if I want to do this, he always came to me in chat and said, where is it? And I said, yeah, it's on that page. And I sent it over to him. Also, the customers didn't find the tutorials somehow. So can you show me how to automate the Android stuff? Yeah, it's in the tutorials here. Like, go to tutorials Android, and that's how you set up Android and all that case. And yeah, somehow nobody was finding this. So the structure was better. It was more comprehensive, but still it lacked structure somehow. So there weren't enough directions somehow here in this page. But before we talk about structure, let's talk a little bit about beautiful. And I did some research for this talk, and I had this feeling, yeah, beautiful, maybe that doesn't really matter for developers, because it felt like it's more like the icing on the cake if it's really beautiful and interactive. And I want to show you a very beautiful interactive documentation after the section. But actually, beautiful is not that important if it's useful. And the most extreme example for this is one of my favorite documentations of all time when I had to configure Nginx is this single page with barely any formatting here. This looks like standard markdown formatting if you render it out in the PDF for a website. And Nginx is based on directives, if you don't know it. And you can use this site. It's a single page, very long. There's no search on it. You just have to use your browser search. But I use this site every day for a few days to configure stuff like arrow page. Like I wanted a custom arrow page. I wanted to do some header mapping and all the things. And yeah, I used the site and was extremely happy with it. I didn't care about anything there hasn't to be shiny colors or interactive demos. It's like, yeah, cool. I find the arrow page because it's called arrow page directive. There's an example or a few examples in some cases. There's a short explanation on how it's used and how it's done, and a real world things explanations on what to look up next if you want to go even deeper. So this was beautiful to me. So maybe that's not that important. So what I would say, if you have barely usable docs or want to improve your docs, don't go all the way to say, yeah, make them extremely beautiful. Make them useful first and then look for some interactive elements. And just last week, I found a very nice, let's give me Slack here, please. So I can move that down. Yeah, thanks. I listened to this podcast and they mentioned the empathy CO docs. That's AI commerce search. It's not a product we use, but they said, yeah, we restructure our doc, make them more interactive and all that stuff. And this is the thing here, like you see here, oh, cool, there's something moving. That's a little bit of spice in there. And if I click on understand the empathy platform, you click here, all these nice interactions, and you can even dive deeper. I think it's also nicely structured. It's easy to read, and yeah, the interactive things here add a lot of spice. It makes them more interesting. But I would say that's the icing on the cake. Go for useful first. So with that, I thought, okay, we have to maybe change our structure. So let's stop this here and get to nearly the final version of our docs, I would say. Yeah, this start up. So maybe you don't think there's a lot of things happening here, but we actually said, yeah, let's restructure our docs here. Let's make it more clear how to follow this. So our getting started guide has some additions here. So we have the starting guide if you just want to dive in. There's also how AskUI works. So a little bit, this is always nice. Some developers like me want to know how things work if they're evaluating product. So this is here. This is here. Installing AskUI has some more things that are operating system specific, like for example, macOS is a little bit tricky to get set up if you open this. What I don't like is this framework configuration because it's nothing here. So in the future, I will remove that. But then, okay, we renamed guides to element selection because all the guides refer to element selection. How do you select elements here? And the normal, we thought about use cases. We came up with our customers, our developers that tried our product and said, yeah, these are the things they're actually trying to do. It's not completely filled out, but it's coming. And this led to less tutorials because you saw there was a tutorial on setting up Android. That's actually not a tutorial. If you think about tutorials, it's more like, okay, this is an example use case you could do. You should set up Android in a different thing. So that should be under executing automation. So there's a whole new section, executing automation. So this makes it more useful. If you want to execute automation, you may be asked where, and you have single device, multi-device, web, mobile, and desktop automation. That's easier to find. And that was also the feedback for marketing. Yeah, now I actually know where to click. So think about the structure of your docs and make them as useful as possible. And marketing is a great source because they talk to customers a lot. Also, if you're building a community, so there's the chat. That's a message. Let's see. Ah, yeah, Robert Meisen asks. Okay. Switch this here over. Like the how AskUI works. Yeah, I'm actually a fan of diagrams as docs, diagrams as code. So it's yeah. But this is Excalibur. If Google Excalibur drawing, they have this nice style, and it's not me that drew this, but some colleague, and I just improved it a little bit. But there's let's close this. So you see, there's a lot of things you have to think about in form of structure, but it still didn't feel right. So I mentioned at the beginning when I showed the docs first, like, if I want to automate Android, there's this local installation thing, but that actually is not a real direction. So are they useful? So really well experienced developers said, yeah, this is comprehensive. I got it up and running in no time. But that's the fun thing. We have a lot of people who are not, I would say, real developers. I hate that term, but they are not developers in their everyday life. They are testers because this is some form of UI automation. A lot of testers come here, a lot of RPAs, robotic process automation. People come to our docs and they may not be as competent in developing and not comfortable in IDEs. That's what we experience. So they're useful, yes, if you're a hardcore developer. But what you have to think about, and that's the thing that missed for me and that clicked about 2 months ago, you have to add some form of segmentation. So when you when you get on your docs and you have all these different people coming to your docs, it's not their developer that comes to your docs, but a lot of different backgrounds, and you have to do some form of segmentation. And there I said it, marketing is your best friend on this because they already do this. So they talk to customers, they know, they did their segmentation to do their campaigns. So talk to your marketing department and find out what are your actual customers. How do they look like? What skills they have, what domain they are coming from. Do some form of segmentation and then go back to your developer docs and structure it like this. And all the examples I showed you before, and I will come up with two here, are doing this in some way or another, maybe unconscious or conscious. I'm not completely sure because I haven't talked to the developers of these developer portals. But if you look at the Platform OS documentation, which won the award for the best accessible docs here, I really like the starting page because you have the search documentation if you're not sure what you're actually searching for. But then if you look at the tiles at the bottom, there are some form of segments. So if you already know what you're doing, go to the API reference. If you just want to try it out and are really sure what this product is all about, follow the getting started. There's also developer guide. So if you're a developer and you know your stuff around, then go to developer guide. And there's some form of segmentation in here. It's even more apparent here in this developer portal where you say, okay, you just want to explore, you're kind of interested, explore our IPs. Then there's also getting started guide that's basically everywhere. And there's a developer blog if you want to dive really deep. So 3 segments they have here in the developer portal. So how do you come up with your segmentation if you talk to marketing? And now we're getting a little bit theoretical. As I said before, the developer mindset always comes with a goal in mind. And this is what in theory is called user goals or user goal. And they are based in the real world. I want to automate this. I want to set up the database Y. So they want to do this in your platform, for example, if you're software as a service provider. So they have all this based in the real world. And this is basically what they want to achieve. And I came up with some of them based on our segmentation, what we saw at our customers. They want to automate UI automate an Android device. They want to automate of native Windows applications. A lot of people come from the enterprise world using our product, Windows application. They have Windows applications and they want to automate this in some way. And the user also wants to automate some form of macOS application. These are real user goals. You see them, they're rooted in the real world. And your docs are not rooted in the real world. They are rooted more or less intellectual. And there's a great book about learning objectives. I didn't read it yet because I read the product as docs and it already provided everything I needed to restructure our docs, but I would recommend Googling learning objectives. You will come for this book. And I also recommend the product as docs if you want to learn something about learning objectives. And learning objectives are intellectual goals. So at the end, if you follow a learning objectives, you will know something, but you won't achieve your user goal. So learning objectives are categorized in 3 different categories. So you have the applicable skill, you have the awareness thing, and you have the comprehension. And if you want to achieve a user goal, you have to have learning objectives, a lot of learning objectives that need to be followed in order to achieve your user goal. Why should we use learning objectives? Learning objectives encapsulate, like a module in programming, encapsulate your knowledge you want to transfer. So you have one learning objective, and if it's written really well, then you can say, okay, I have this piece of information here. It's encapsulated, and if something changes for this piece, I only have to change this piece. A lot of documentation, if you read it carefully, is like you have to install this, and there's an explanation on how to install it, and then you need to do this, you need to do this all in one page. And this is a sign of not well-structured learning objectives. So these learning objectives bleed into each other. It's better to say, okay, I have this specific learning objective, and then reference other checklists. So your documentation becomes modular, which improves maintenance. So one of the categories is the applicable skill, and I came up with this learning objectives and restructured our tutorials because they were, especially the Android section, was bleeding into one another. There was a whole mix up of learning objectives in 3 pages, and I was like, how could anyone get this set up? And I said, okay, the user should be able to connect our software with their device. That's one learning objective. I don't want them to install anything from us. That's in another learning objective. That's a getting started guide. And this is an applicable skill. So they're actually doing something. So if you think about monitoring, for example, this is a nice example from product docs where they say, I want to set up an alarm, a monitoring thing that should alarm me if something goes wrong in production. That's a really user goal. And they came up with, okay, first you have to know how the different methods are set up. So this is a awareness learning objective. You say, okay, we have this, and that. We have these different monitoring notifications that we can send. That's awareness. And this, for us, this was like the user should be able to describe the different methods to use to select text. So we have different methods like just similarity search, exact text search, regex text search. So they should be aware, okay, there are different methods. And then you have comprehension where someone actually has a use case and says, oh, which method is the best to use? The user should be able to choose the most applicable text selection method in their specific scenario. So that's comprehension. They actually know how to use this information. I don't want to dive deep into learning objectives because that's more or less like 2 talks, if you follow the theory. But think about learning objectives like encapsulated modules. And to achieve a user goal, you actually have to follow a few objectives there. To getting started, connect your device, do this automation, and maybe something else here, which I can't come up right now. So think about it like that. So this brings us to the final form of our documentation, and I hope the internet still works. Where I said, okay, what are the use cases we see at our customers, at our developers? And then I restructured the whole getting started page to give some direction. It's not as beautiful as the platform OS thing. I didn't get to that. But actually, we saw a few use cases here. Like the quick start is still there if you want to try it out. But then we had a lot of Windows automation things. So getting started on Windows is very, very important. Also on Android, macOS, Linux. And then we saw, okay, we have a lot of enterprise customers, and I bet this is a Java conference. A lot of people are working in enterprise companies, and yeah, you have specific challenges there. Like, yeah, you have a proxy, and if you do something like we do, automating your operating system and talking to a cloud vendor over an API, yeah. Proxies are a real thing. Also, permissions on what you can install on your machine is different. If you're a developer, maybe you have a master password. That's cool, but a lot of people don't have a master password, and they can't even use their shell sometimes because that's restricted. So we have this enterprise checklist where you say, okay, if you're working enterprise, make sure to get all this set up first before you start. And that's a nice direction, because they would just stumble into the Windows automation. They say like, yeah, that doesn't work. I can't do this and that, and then they churn. That's not what I actually want. So this is the final form of our docs here. I'm very happy with this. So what this also gives me is not a generic guide on how to install something, but maybe the guide should be different for Windows. macOS is very restrictive on permissions, so you have to give some permissions to control your operating system. That's very specific to macOS. So you have these different directions you can send your users to, and they are more happy like this. We don't have any feedback yet, but I'm very confident that this improves our documentation. And let's look at the time. We have 5 minutes left. That should last for the demonstration. So how do we build this? Yeah, define your user goals, derive some learning objectives there. Design follows function, very important. And then how do we build the docs? And I really like this because docs as code was already set up. Why docs as code? I go over this a little bit more quickly to have the live demos covered. Editing live docs as code is easier, even for developers. So you may get your developers of your community set up. You can do the same stuff as you do with code. You can do reviews, you can prove your documentation, all that review things are cool. It's still usable in enterprise systems. You can style your docs as code like you want. And if you have the docs as code, you can generate every format out of it with a specific parsers. Versioning becomes very easy. So you see a lot of documentation has different versions. OpenShift is a good example for me. You say, okay, I have OpenShift 2, 3, and 4, and I can select a specific version where the documentation may be different for specific features. And I always read about WYSIWYG editors. What you see is what you get, like work or rich text editors. That's not for docs as code. It's what you see is what you mean. So you say that's a heading, and the parser renders it the correct way. What we use is a text stack, but that's more like a little bit of opinionated. I found Docosaurus to be useful, but use what you like. MP-Docs for Markdown. There's also ASCII-Doc for if you use something like I can come up with a name from Ralf Müller. You can look that up for ASCII-Doc. What I use for linting is Alex for inclusive language. I think that that's very important. And I also use spell checker CLI. That's also for spell checking and domain terms, but you can use something more specific if you want to have a style guide and enforce style among your docs. That's the next thing I would look into. Then you can use something like Whale, but that was a little bit too much for now. I wanted to get the structure right. So let's get to the live demo. And the fun thing about docs as code is you can lint them very easily because they're just text. They're not some form of document like Word or thing. You can just analyze it like text. And what we implemented was Alex and spell checker and how you do this in Node. Because Docosaurus is based on React. You can also extend this with the React to make it more interactive, your docs. You just add a script, install the packages, and use it. And for spell checker, I have a single command which says, okay, read in the config, and I strongly suggest you use a config there because per default it scans everything in your repository. So even images, and that can take a very, very long time. So you have the spell checker thing, and then you have the spell checker dictionary, which is very important, where you can define terms like macOS, for example. macOS, did you know that macOS, the M is in lowercase? Yeah, I didn't know this either. So that's the thing I put here in spell checker dictionary. So if I do something like macOS, let's stop this here. macOS is a great operating system. Then run spell check docs. Then this spell checking will allow me to that. So you can have your specific dictionary. Yeah, so there's an error here. And it says, yeah, that's not written the correct way. It's misspelled. What it's lacking is that, yeah, okay, what's the respelling? So if you do it custom, then it may not pick up on macOS. So if I remove this, then it should run through. If you want to run this before every build, before every commit, you can do something like pre-commit. We use the Husky package here, but that's totally up to your ecosystem. There are a lot of pre-commit things here. So inclusive language, Alex is great and fast. So if you don't know about inclusive language, it's something like if somebody says, hey guys, that's not inclusive. A lot of people use it, but actually guys is like the masculine form, and maybe the female and non-binary, all the other genders feel cut out. And I totally get it. It's the feedback we get from especially female developers who use it. Hey guys is not inclusive, and I get it. So if I use hey guys and run then language docs, then I get an error. And Alex is really nice. It's not perfect, of course, because it's just a static linter. It says, okay, guys may be insensitive. Use people, persons, forks, etc. It even gives you some suggestions. You can configure this also to exclude some pages if you have a guys in there, it's not you can't take it out. But that's a really nice way to actually get inclusive language into your docs. So if I do this for people, and we saw this, and do this again, then yeah, no issues found. So it's extremely fast. If you're into no profanity, so if you have profanity in your docs, you can use a package like no profanity. It scans for profanity in your docs. Hope you don't have this in your docs already, but if you have, you can do this. So the takeaways, sorry, for this talk is think about your docs from a developer mindset. So you have user goals. They don't care. Developers usually don't care about your features, but can you solve a problem? For me, design follows function. Even the most ugly docs can be extremely useful and that's perceived beautiful. Talk to marketing or do your own research, segmentate your users, your developers, because even in developers, there are different segments on what they're coming with, their domain knowledge, their experience. Be very precise with that if you can. It's sometimes hard if you can get feedback from your developers reusing a product. Then if you have your user goals, define learning objectives. They should be encapsulated to be easily maintainable, and you can combine them, reference them to actually achieve the user goal. And this was a little bit short, because this was the first time. Use docs as code, because docs as code give you the ability that your developers in your community can write docs, and it's also easily versionable. You can recover things. It's a superior approach to develop docs. And that's it. And I hope I can see the chat. Yeah, I posted after the talk, Robert. So if you have questions, I'm here. If not, you have an extended break, get some coffee, and enjoy the rest of the conference.